Welcome to Photomission Exposure, a podcast for photographers. This is our very first episode. On today's show, we're talking with a wedding photographer with 20 years' experience about the challenges and joys of photographing weddings for a living. In the studio with me today is Terri. So would you like to introduce yourself, Terri, and let's get into the show.
Yeah, so my name's Terri, and I operate under the business name of Terri Hanlon Photography, using my own name as an identifier. I felt it's always been important to use that as my brand, to use myself and my own name. And I've been photographing on and off for about 20 years now with my own brand and also with a few other brands around the place. So I started off as a glamour photographer in the I think it was late 90s, early 2000s. And then about 10 years ago, decided to work for myself, and that's kind of where it's been going.
Excellent. And so, when did you first get interested in photography? What was the age that you kind of started taking photos?
I was about 16 when I started to get interested in photography. There was just your high school photography classes that I really was desperate to get into, and my parents had a little camera that was just sitting around the house and used to fiddle with that when they weren't around, and yeah, that's where it all started. Then went on to university and did some study through uni as well.
So with that high school photography, you got into the darkroom and actually...
We did, yeah. So it started off in film. There was no such thing as digital cameras back then at all. So that was, gosh, I'm not even going to try and remember the year. But yeah, it was darkroom photography, so black and white film. So we learned all of the processes of exposure, all the technical sides of really basic photography, which was great foundations to set up with.
So I know, look, I can remember because I probably started a little bit before you. I was very early age. I was fortunate we had a darkroom at home.
Yeah.
So I got exposed to film photography, but I mean, that first time you saw an image actually in the developer, you see this image appearing on the paper.
Yeah,
it's just, Can you remember that?
Insane, absolutely insane. Yeah, to have that transfer of light onto paper, and yeah, it was just incredible. Really
it just seemed like magic. It was like, how is this possible?
Yeah, and there was so much involved in the technical process of actually getting that image to the paper as well. So you the process of the negative, developing the negative and then getting it to the development stage onto the paper and through different chemical processes. That was really quite interesting, and I really loved that process, the hands-on feel to creating an image. And yeah, definitely used that as part of my basis for a few of my my art projects, I guess, when I was in university doing my fine arts degree. So yeah. And
but even leading to before you actually take the roll of film out of the canister and feed it into the tank and that type of stuff, there was the challenges were also there with those cameras of that era too was getting the exposure right. Because unlike modern cameras today where there's lots of aids to help you get the exposure right, you pretty much had to dial up the settings and hope that you got it.
That's absolutely correct, yeah. And I have to say that I was pretty terrible to start with. I was pretty ordinary at getting my exposures right. Definitely something that took a lot of practice and a lot to understand as well. So just one thing that kind of comes to mind when we speak about that is the zone system, with the Ansel Adams zone system, and how to understand exposing your images for the right portions of the images that you wanted to showcase. So I think that was really important to learn as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people took a lot of stuff away from Ansel Adams as far as a bit of a pioneer in photography, and I think a lot of people who've shot film and started with film have a different appreciation of digital because you've done some of the hard yards. And then you get to the digital platforms that we all shoot with now, and sometimes, like I said, it's good to strip it back and be able to kind of shoot back and how it used to happen. So with that shooting at 16 and that type of stuff, was that when you kind of started to maybe think I'd like to do this as a career, or?
I think it really manifested when I was later in high school, like year 11 and 12 studies doing photography. I went through those classes quite fast and really enjoyed them, and then went on to do fine arts at university. And I think it'd have to be from when I shot my first wedding when I was in uni, and that's when I really decided that I wanted to make a career of it. There was something about the whole process of photographing a wedding that I just had to do. I really, really enjoyed it. And it was just that old-fashioned notion of doing something that you enjoy as a profession. I was really lucky to identify that quite young.
And look, you talk about that, the feeling that you got, and it's interesting because I talked to a lot of photographers, and one of the things that's been talked about recently is about how photography makes people feel, and there's actually a lot of stuff now around the fact that photography is actually really good for your mental health as well, because it's a kind of mindfulness, and people get into a zone and they talk about this, they're in a happy place when they're photographing. And I think for anyone who likes creating, and photography is one of those creative pursuits, is there is a real buzz of getting the shot and being able to make that happen. So.
Yeah, there is. And kind of touching on that as well, when I was in university doing my art projects, I really used my photography as a mental health, kind of an escape. I used it to deal with a lot of issues that I couldn't quite articulate at that young age, and a lot of things that I guess we process as emotional intelligence these days, I was really exploring through my photography. So I found it really therapeutic back then, and really it helped me get through a lot of issues. And like I said, that's really been started. I think that's really been started to be looked at now, that there's actually programs for people actually trying to get people into photography who are dealing with some challenges, because it does help. And I think that's the thing that always drawn me back to photography, is that is a feeling, and a part of the reason why I want to do these podcasts is that it's for photographers to listen to, because quite often in your own family, your family don't get you as a photographer. You're running around excited. Look, I've just captured, and they're going to go and okay. I relate to that feeling absolutely.
And a lot of photographers do. A lot of photographers, and that's why there's been a lot of groups of photographers, but that have got together and to be able to kind of share that passion they've got for photography, and better talk to a photographer and actually get what the photographer's saying, rather than, like I said, people just looking at you really strangely. Why would you want to get up at that time of the morning and you want to shoot what? That type of stuff. And that's, I think, always a challenge for photographers. One of the other things about photographers, and I know I did read this on your website about you're a bit of a lone wolf shooter. And it's interesting because recently I asked a whole group of photographers about what type of style of photography, and an enormous amount of them came back and actually said, I'm kind of a lone wolf. I like to go off and just do my own thing and shoot, or be shooting something that I'm in control of the whole event. So is that because of the amount of creative control you've got, do you think? Or
I have to say it's because I started shooting alone, and I've never really wanted to rely on anyone else to assist me through that process, and definitely because of the creative control. Because to me, it's an image is a language, and I'm the one that's portraying that language, and I'm the one that's speaking through that image. So I think if someone else was involved in that, it wouldn't really be my story. It would be a combination of possibly the two of us, or they would definitely influence the way that it turns out. So yeah.
And talking about your images, because I've looked at your images on your website, and some of your images do speak.
Thank you.
Which is that's the sign of a good photograph. If the photograph speaks to somebody, you've done a good job as a photographer. You've actually got to that place.
Thank you. That's lovely feedback. Thank you.
And look, it is, and look, I think the thing about it is these days, and it's so competitive now in the field that you're doing. I mean, you're predominantly doing weddings and event type photography. There's a lot of people doing that, and I look at a lot of different photographers' work, and some of it is, I wouldn't be glad I wasn't paying for it.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a standard, which is really, some of them are nice photos.
Yep.
But that's it. They're not telling me much about what's happening. And even like I looked through some of your photos and some of your portfolios, and you've grabbed a lot of detail. You've taken pictures of things that probably most people would miss.
Yeah.
I saw a picture there of a clock that you took, and I got the reference to it straight away that, on a day like a wedding, the clock is very important.
Oh, yeah.
Because everything's done by the clock.
Yeah.
So everyone's looking at the clock.
Yes.
So I kind of got that connection straight away when I saw that picture. Now, some people might not see that, but that was kind of lovely to see someone who actually kind of takes the craft to that level where you're actually trying to, bring that creative element into it and tell the story. And I know you talk about too when on your website about how long should people should get you for, and you're saying, well, how much of the story do you want me to tell?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, the longer that you're involved, obviously, and, we were talking before we started this, we were talking about behind the scenes and different things. And sometimes that's really important.
Absolutely.
Part of any event is to get that behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to understand how much effort and work goes into something, even on a wedding day. There is so much that happens before the couple get to the church that is such an integral part of their story and their journey together. And when you're talking about the details, I think it's really important that as a wedding photographer, we understand who the couple are that we're photographing. It's really important for us to ask questions to find out little details about what they've got around their house, if they're getting ready at home, things that make them the people that they are, because that's how we can tell their story. Because at the end of the day, it's not about us as photographers when we're photographing a wedding, it's about the couple, and that's so incredibly
and the weddings are such a personal thing, and there's so many personal elements in there. And like you said, a lot of people will try and bring elements of their everyday lives and things that they love into the wedding, and for you to be able to understand those things and to have those conversations with the clients to be able to understand it. So you can say, well, why don't we do this? And I was recently, it was a different type of event that, and the guy who was actually emceeing the event was really good at trying to bring in some elements. He was asking people, to bring some personal stuff in, so we could have some, to make it lighten it up as well. But I think it's really, it's an art in itself, is actually trying to read the couple and get that information, and then be able to, with all the other things that are happening, try to better keep it all on track, because you've got a fairly tight ship to run when you're doing a wedding.
So much so. Many things,
it's different. Like, I shoot lots of different events where we can, that didn't work, let's do it again. Can't do it for
we can't do it again. No, we've got that one day, and if something is even running 5 minutes off schedule, it throws the whole day out. There's times where hair and makeup might be late, or the bride might be late, or anything. There's so many things that can take over and really affect the running of that day and affect the time that we spend together. And it's just crazy. It is insane.
And look, weddings are stressful for everybody.
So much so. Yeah.
So it is kind of good to be able to keep the train rolling through, because people, don't need any more stress on the day. Everyone wants their wedding day to be perfect.
That's right.
And they don't want to have something go wrong that is going to, derail the whole day and spoil it, type of thing. So,
and as photographers, we definitely don't want to be part of that derailing. We really want to be the neutralisers. I know in my experience, I often go in with the intention to really enhance that experience for the couple, rather than make it a non-enjoyable kind of time.
I kind of see wedding photographers is that they value add to the day.
Yeah. And
it's interesting because, what happens is there's a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, a lot of time picking the flowers, there's a lot of time picking the cake and doing all those things, and the wedding dress. But the reality is, after the day, the flowers are wilted, they're gone. The cake at some point gets consumed and eaten.
Hopefully I get some, yeah.
The wedding dress will be hung in the cupboard and may turn yellow or whatever, but you've always got the photographs. Like that's the thing that keeps it fresh, and that people can go back and look at those photographs and basically relive that moment. And it's also for the other people, the family as well. And sometimes too, because of distance, the photographs might be, for some family members, the only connection to the day that they're going to have. Yeah. So it's kind of important that you do capture that.
Absolutely. I had a couple that came from Ireland, and they got married here in a church. Now, none of their immediate family could attend because they were getting married in secret. But what they had done was they Skyped in with them at the ceremony, and they didn't know that they were Skyping into their ceremony. So it was a really integral part to have great images for them, and it was really special to be part of that.
Yeah. You love doing what you do, but the pressure is that sometimes does the pressure really get, sometimes it just really, you struggle with everything not going right. How do you kind of deal with that? What do you do?
I think when I first started, the pressure was a little bit difficult to get a handle on. as I've gotten older and the more weddings that I've photographed, I understand that no wedding is going to run perfectly. No wedding is going to be the same as the other one. And it's really just a case of how to roll with the challenges that come up during the day. I just know that it is what it is at the end of the day, and we just have to make the best out of every situation that we get given.
And I think that's good advice for life in general.
Yeah.
You know,